Tonight, the lanterns burn low, and the wind carries the whisper of autumn's final breath. Shadows stretch long across cobblestone streets, and somewhere within the hush of a forgotten century, something stirs awake. The year is 1890, and the night is Halloween. A night when strange traditions flicker like candle flames and old superstitions breathe once more. Before we step through the veil of time, take a moment. If you're listening from the United States, from Europe, or from some quiet corner across the sea, welcome. Tell me where you are, and what hour the clock marks in your world. Is it evening where the wind rattles your windows? Midnight, when the air grows colder? Or perhaps the soft gray of dawn, when sleep begins to creep upon your eyes? Take a breath. Let your room fall still. Draw your blanket a little closer, and allow your mind to drift to a night long past, where the line between the living and the dead grew thin as mist. In a small valley tucked deep between rolling hills, a village lies sleeping beneath the watch of a pale crescent moon. Its rooftops, thatched and low, breathe thin curls of smoke into the cold air. Along the narrow road, turnip lanterns glow faintly, smaller and rougher than the pumpkins we know today. Their crooked faces, carved by tired hands, flicker with uneven light, each one seeming to watch the night with its own weary gaze. Children hurry down the lanes in twos and threes, their coats patched, their shoes worn thin. They clutch reed baskets and whisper to one another, laughter quiet and nervous. For tonight is not a night of play, it is a night of omens. At each doorstep, they leave small tokens. A sprig of rosemary for protection. A pinch of salt to scatter evil. And sometimes a crumb of bread for wandering spirits. Their parents have told them that on Halloween night, the restless walk unseen, hungry not for harm, but for remembrance. From the distance comes the slow toll of the church bell, deliberate, heavy, as though marking each step toward midnight. A horse-drawn cart rattles by, its driver silent beneath his cloak, the horse's breath ghosting pale into the air. The hooves strike the stones with a rhythm like a heartbeat, echoing through the still village. Above, the moon hangs thin and sharp, a silver sickle drawn across a black sky. And somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, low, mournful. The villagers pause when they hear it. For them, such a sound is no mere bird call, but a sign, a reminder that the night is listening. In one small cottage, warmth spills from the hearth, though unease clings thick in the air. The walls are stone, damp with moss and years, and the heavy wooden door stands firmly shut against the wandering dark. Inside, a family gathers close. Their shadows sway on the walls as the fire crackles low. The matron of the house, her face lined with quiet strength, tends the flames. She wears a frayed wool shawl that still carries the faint scent of last summer's lavender. Every motion of her hand is deliberate, mindful, for every gesture, on this night, carries meaning. In her lap rests a bowl of red apples, not for eating, but for divination. Her children sit cross-legged by the rug, eyes wide, half in wonder, half in fear. A boy leans forward as his grandmother whispers tales of Halloween nights gone by. Of hollow footsteps echoing down empty lanes. Of candles that burn without smoke. And mirrors that reveal not faces, but fates. Her voice is soft as autumn leaves, each word a fragment of old belief, passed from elder to child. The father, silent, carves a final lantern from a knotted turnip. The blade scrapes steady and slow, releasing the earthy scent of raw root. He cuts the eyes and mouth with care, not for decoration, but protection. For the villagers believe the shape of the lantern's face confuses wandering spirits. When he finishes, he sets a stub of candle inside. Its flame flickers to life, a crooked grin glowing in the dim. On the table rests a small plate of oat cakes and honey. An offering, not for the family, but for unseen guests. To forget the offering, they say, is to invite misfortune before dawn. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, pressing against the house like a living thing. The youngest child clutches a straw doll, its button eyes gleaming faintly in the firelight. She leans against her sister, whispering, "Will they come tonight?" Her sister does not answer. She only listens, to the wind that seems to breathe through the cracks. The night deepens. The fire burns lower, its glow soft and orange, painting the room in trembling light. Beyond the window, the road lies quiet, except for the turnip lanterns, their flames wavering in the wind. Curiosity gnaws at the eldest boy. He rises, steps to the window, and presses his palm to the cold glass. Outside, he sees the faint orange dots stretching into the distance, and between them, shadows shifting. Then, a figure. Tall. Still. Watching. Too silent, too motionless to be one of the villagers. He blinks, and it's gone. But something in the air has changed, as though whatever was out there has noticed him too. He steps back quickly. His grandmother watches, her eyes narrowing. Without a word, she takes a small pouch from the mantel, rough linen, smelling of sage and iron. She sprinkles its contents into the fire. A sudden flare, a rush of herbal smoke. "Protection," she murmurs. Her voice trembles, but her hands do not. The mother hums softly, an old tune passed through generations. Its melody weaves through the air like a lullaby for the living and the dead alike. The children listen, pressing close, while outside the whispers begin again. Curling along the roof, threading through the eaves, slipping through the cracks of the shutters. They are not words, not truly, but they sound almost human, as if the air itself remembers voices from long ago. The candlelight wavers. The hearth glows red. And then, a sound. 3 slow knocks. Firm. Deliberate. Not hurried, not desperate, but patient. The room freezes. The children's eyes dart to the door. The father's jaw tightens, his hand grips the wooden spoon like a weapon. The grandmother's lips move in prayer, her rosary clicking fast. Another knock. Slower. Drawn out. The mother does not go to the door. No one would, not on this night. Instead, she scatters herbs on the small table beneath the stairs. The scent of sage rising sharp and bitter. Outside, the wind shifts. Footsteps, dragging, slow, pass along the cobblestones. Then silence. The father speaks at last, his voice steady but low. No one opens tonight. For they all know the old warning. That on All Hallows' Eve, the dead may knock. They seek warmth, food, acknowledgement. And though kindness is sacred, on this night, to open the door is to invite what cannot leave. The turnip lantern flickers, its flame bending toward the door. The candle beside it gutters, dripping slow rivers of wax. Then, from beyond the door, a faint laugh. Not cruel. Not joyful. Just empty. Like an echo that has forgotten its source. The fire cracks. The sound startles the youngest child, who buries her face in her doll. But no one speaks. for the silence that follows feels deeper than fear. At last, the grandmother rises. She asks the boy to fetch the iron pot from the hearth. Its sides are warm, coated with soot. Inside lies a bed of cool ash. She dips her fingers into the dust and traces a gray line across the threshold. What the fire has touched, she whispers, the restless cannot cross. The children watch in silence as the ash drifts down like gray snow, marking a fragile boundary between worlds. The father listens, hearing not the usual sounds of the village, but something subtler. The faint movement of air, the suggestion of unseen shapes shifting just beyond the walls. As the evening deepened, the streets of the small 1890s town glimmered under the amber glow of gas lamps. Children, their laughter echoing like faint spirits, darted between houses carrying hollowed-out turnips with flickering candles inside. Jack-o'-lanterns, in their earliest forms, grinned with uneven teeth, grotesque smiles carved not from pumpkins, but from fear itself. For the townsfolk of that age, Halloween was not a night for play alone, it was a night for protection. Housewives hung iron keys above doorways to keep the fairies at bay. Men whispered old prayers as they nailed sprigs of rowan wood to their barns, hoping their cattle wouldn't be taken before dawn. In the great hall at the edge of town, a Halloween gathering was underway. Candles burned low, and the smell of beeswax and smoke filled the air. Women in lace collars sat with bowls of water and apples floating on the surface, a game, they said, to catch one's fortune. Whoever caught an apple with their teeth before midnight would soon find true love. The mother, shawl drawn close, places more oat cakes on the offering plate. Honey glows in the light, golden, comforting. The scent mingles with sage and smoke. Will the ashes keep them away? The youngest asks softly. The grandmother smiles faintly. They do not keep them away, she says. They remind them where they cannot step. A faint scratching rises from the shutters, slow, dragging, deliberate. Once. Then again. And then, nothing. The grandmother folds her hands. Her rosary beads glint faintly in the firelight. The ashes hold, she murmurs. Let us trust they will hold until dawn. Outside, the church bell tolls once, a deep, solemn note rolling across the valley. Carrying through the night like the last heartbeat of the old world, but beneath the laughter, there lingered unease. Some said that if you looked too long into the candle's flame that night, you could see the face of the one destined to die before the year's end. Others refused to look at mirrors entirely, afraid of who, or what, might look back. At the stroke of 10, the church bells tolled, slow, hollow notes that rolled through the fog like a warning. From beyond the fields came the cry of a lone owl, and every heart in that hall stilled for a breath. Superstition had it that an owl's call on Halloween was the voice of a restless soul, seeking to be remembered. In a dim corner sat Margaret O'Leary, an old widow whose face was lined like weathered parchment. She had lived through more winters than anyone could count, and her eyes seemed to hold the memory of every lost Halloween. The veil grows thin tonight, she whispered to no one in particular. The dead are listening. Her words drifted through the hall like smoke, curling around each person's ear, leaving behind a chill that no fire could warm. Outside, the wind began to rise, a deep, low moan that rattled the shutters and swayed the lanterns. Somewhere far away, a dog barked once, then went silent. The laughter inside turned uneasy, softer now, as though the walls themselves were listening. A young girl, perhaps no older than 12, stepped forward with a candle in her trembling hand. My mother says we can see our future husbands in the mirror, she said shyly, holding up a looking-glass. The others giggled nervously, daring her to try. Margaret watched in silence as the girl turned toward the mirror, her candlelight flickering against the glass. For a moment, there was only her reflection, wide eyes and a trembling lip. Then, the light dimmed, and in that dimness, another face appeared behind her. Pale. Hollow-eyed. Smiling. The girl screamed, dropping the mirror. It shattered across the wooden floor, and the candle went out. The hall fell into darkness. No one moved. Outside, the wind howled louder, and the bells began to toll again, 11 times this time, though some swore later they heard 12. The shattered mirror lay in 100 glittering pieces, each shard catching what little candlelight remained. For a long moment, no one breathed. The air itself seemed to pause, thick and heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Then, one of the men, Thomas Greaves, the blacksmith, muttered something under his breath and bent to pick up the broken glass. "Just a trick of the light," he said, though his voice trembled. Nothing more. But as he reached for the largest piece, he froze. Because in that fragment, small as a coin, he saw not his own reflection, but the same pale, hollow-eyed face that had appeared behind the girl. The shard slipped from his fingers and sliced a red line across his palm. The blood that fell to the wooden floor seemed almost to hiss. Someone gasped. Someone else crossed themselves. Margaret O'Leary only whispered, "It has begun." Outside, the wind pressed against the hall like a living thing, rattling doors, whining through the cracks in the walls. The candles fluttered and one by one began to die out, as though invisible hands were pinching them to silence. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate raps on the great oak door. Boom. 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 Every head turned. The room filled with the sound of breathing, fast, shallow, fearful. Thomas swallowed hard. "No one goes out on Halloween night after 11, he said. "No one knocks." Still, the knocking came again, softer now, almost polite. A few of the men gathered near the door, lanterns trembling in their grip. When the door creaked open, the night spilled in, cold, black, and thick with mist, and there, standing at the threshold, was a figure cloaked in tattered gray. The stranger's face was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, wet from the fog. His voice, when it came, was low and rough, like the sound of stones scraping together. "Pardon me," he said. "I seek shelter, just until midnight." No one spoke. Margaret rose slowly, her gaze fixed upon him. "Midnight," she repeated softly. "That's all you need?" The man nodded once. His hands, pale and veined like marble, clutched the edges of his cloak. At last, Thomas stepped aside. "Come in, then," he said, though the words seemed to stick in his throat. The stranger entered. The air grew colder. Every candle flame dipped low as though bowing to him. Somewhere in the shadows, the clock began to tick louder, counting down the moments to 12. He sat apart from the others, near the hearth where the fire crackled weakly. No one dared ask his name, though each felt the urge to. The old widow watched him the entire time, her wrinkled hands clutching a rosary that had lost its shine long ago. The girl who had dropped the mirror hid behind her mother, whispering, "Mama, his feet, he has no feet." The mother shushed her quickly, refusing to look. The stranger said nothing more. He merely waited, his eyes glinting from beneath the brim of his hat. And as the clock hands crept closer to midnight, a strange sound began to rise from the woods, a chorus of whispers carried on the wind. The people of the hall huddled close, remembering every old tale ever told by their grandmothers, of spirits that walked on All Hallows' Eve, seeking warmth, seeking names, seeking passage. And then, as the final minute before midnight came, the stranger finally spoke again. His voice was barely more than a sigh. "Thank you," he said, "for remembering." Then he stood, and the fire went out. When the clock struck 12, he was gone. And the door stood open to the fields beyond, where the mist rolled and the owl called once more. When the first light of dawn crept across the hills, the mist had not yet lifted. It hung low and heavy over the fields, clinging to the earth like a burial shroud. The town, once alive with Halloween laughter, now lay silent, as though holding its breath after some great, unspoken event. Thomas Greaves was the first to step outside. His boots sank into the wet soil as he crossed the square, still bandaged from the cut on his hand. The air was unnaturally cold for morning. His breath came in clouds that swirled and disappeared before his eyes. He paused when he reached the churchyard. The grass there was frosted white, though no frost had been forecast. Every tombstone glittered faintly, each one marked with a single black feather. He knelt and picked one up. It was identical to the feather left behind in the hall, soft, dark, and shining as though dipped in oil. When he touched it, a strange warmth pulsed through his fingers, and he dropped it quickly. By the time the others gathered, the church bell had begun to ring again, though no one had pulled its rope. It tolled 12 slow notes, 12, though the sun was already high above the hills. Margaret O'Leary arrived last, walking slowly with her cane. She looked at the feathers and then at the woods beyond the fields. Her eyes were glassy with memory. "I told you," she said softly. "The dead come home to those who forget them." The townspeople listened in uneasy silence. The girl who had dropped the mirror clutched her mother's arm. "Was it him, Miss O'Leary?" she asked. "The man who came last night?" Margaret nodded faintly. "Long ago," she began, "before most of you were born, there was a fire out in those woods. Halloween night, 1859. A carriage overturned on the old bridge, and the lord of the manor, Edward Harrow, was burned alive inside. They said his spirit never rested. His body was buried out past the fields, but his soul," she looked up at the bell tower, where the sound still echoed. A murmur ran through the crowd. The blacksmith crossed himself. "Then what did he want?" he asked. Margaret's lips trembled into a sad, knowing smile. "Not vengeance," she said. "Remembrance." For years, the people had forgotten the Harrow name. The manor had fallen to ruin, its grave untended, its story lost in the turning of generations. But Halloween, the night when worlds blur, had given him passage once more, to remind them of a promise made and broken. As she spoke, the mist began to move, swirling slowly toward the old road that led to the woods. Through it, they saw faint shapes, shadows walking, faint outlines of figures carrying lanterns, their forms fading with each step. The people stood frozen, watching as the procession vanished into the light, leaving only silence behind. Then the bells stopped ringing. When the townsfolk finally returned to the great hall, they found the chair where the stranger had sat. The wood was cold as stone, the hearth untouched, yet carved into the seat was a single word: remember. That night, they lit candles in every window. Not for the living, but for those who might still wander. And from that year onward, the people of that town never let Halloween pass without light, prayer, and a whispered greeting to the unseen. For they had learned, as their ancestors once knew, that some traditions are not meant to be forgotten, and that every All Hallows Eve, the veil will thin again, waiting for those who remember. Decades passed. Seasons turned. The town changed names twice and grew roads where fields once stood. Gas lamps gave way to electric light, horses disappeared, and factories rose where the meadows had breathed. Yet on the far edge of what was once that small village, the old assembly hall still stood. Weather-worn, roof sagging, its windows dark and blind. Children dared one another to go near it after dusk, whispering of the night when a stranger came and the bells rang by themselves. In the autumn of 1938, a young historian named Eleanor Finch arrived, sent by the university to document the folklore remnants of northern towns. She found the hall on her second day, half buried in vines, its door hanging loose. Inside, the air smelled of dust, wood rot, and something faintly sweet, beeswax, perhaps, from candles burned long ago. Her footsteps echoed through the hollow space as she swept her lantern's beam across the walls. There, under layers of soot, she found carvings, initials, dates, and a single word cut deeper than the rest: remember. She knelt to trace the letters. The wood was cold, though the morning was warm. Her lantern flickered once, twice, then steadied. Curious, she opened her notebook and began writing notes on superstition, on the old customs of All Hallows Eve. She jotted down what the locals had told her. That candles had once burned here for the dead. That mirrors were covered at midnight. That a man without feet came knocking on the door. As she wrote, a gust of wind swept through the hall though every window was closed. Her lantern went out, leaving her in sudden dark. For a heartbeat, the silence was absolute. Then, faintly, came the sound of bells, distant, slow, 12 strokes rolling across the fields like a remembered heartbeat. Eleanor froze. She thought she heard footsteps behind her, soft, deliberate, crossing the wooden floor. She turned, lifting the lantern glass to relight it, and in that flicker saw something in the corner, a figure in gray, half shadow, half smoke. It raised its head slightly, and though she could not see its face, she felt a strange calm instead of fear. The figure inclined its hat, a silent nod of gratitude, and then faded like breath on glass. When she finally stepped outside, the morning fog was gone. Only the sunlight remained, spilling gold over the churchyard beyond. The stones there were clean, each one marked with a single black feather resting lightly upon it. Eleanor gathered one and pressed it between the pages of her notebook. She wrote her final line beneath it. That night, as the town prepared for Halloween once more, a strange glow was seen in the windows of the old hall, a soft, amber flicker, like candles burning unseen hands. Some said it was just the wind, some said it was a trick of the moon. But those who knew the story, those who still believed, whispered the truth. Every All Hallows Eve, the dead of 1890 returned to sit once more beneath the faint light of memory, waiting for the living to keep the promise carved in wood. The wind had quieted now. The fields, once alive with whispers, lay still beneath the silver veil of night. Somewhere far away, a single bell rang, not loud, not clear, but soft enough to sound like a memory returning home. In the heart of that forgotten town, the old hall still stood. Its walls leaned like tired shoulders, its windows clouded by time. Yet every year, on the night between October 31st and November 1st, a strange thing happened. Lights would flicker in its windows. Footprints would appear in the dust, small and large, some bare, some booted. And though no door was seen to open, faint music would drift into the night air, the creak of an old fiddle, a woman's laughter, the murmured clink of glasses raised in an unseen toast. The people who still lived nearby learned not to fear it. They said it was only the Halloween gathering, returning for one night. The veil between then and now grew thin again, and the past, gentle and sorrowful, came back to dance. Those who dared to walk close enough could see it through the windows, or so they claimed. Shadows of men in waistcoats and women in lace sleeves, spinning beneath candlelight that burned without smoke. And in the center, by the hearth that never truly died, stood a tall figure in gray, watching over them all. The legend of Edward Harrow lived on, not as a tale of vengeance but of devotion, a reminder that even forgotten souls still long to be remembered. As the clock neared midnight, the wind would rise again, carrying the same whispered word that had been carved in wood, written in hearts, and carried through generations. Remember. And when the last candle finally dimmed, the hall would grow silent once more. But in that silence lingered something eternal. Perhaps it was the warmth of gratitude. Perhaps it was the echo of lives that had loved, lost, and waited. Or perhaps it was the soft promise that no story, once told with truth, ever truly dies. Because every Halloween night, in every forgotten corner of time, the spirits still walk, the bells still toll, and the living still listen. Not out of fear, but reverence. For the dead are not gone. They are simply waiting for someone, somewhere, to whisper their name, and to remember. Years passed after that long-ago Halloween of 1890. The little valley village aged quietly, its cobblestone lanes worn smoother by time and rain. The old cottages sagged beneath ivy and moss, and the church bell, once clear and proud, now rang with a tired, uneven tone. But one thing never changed: every Halloween night, faint orange lights would appear along the road that wound through the valley. Not the bright glow of pumpkins, nor the cheerful gleam of oil lamps, but dim, trembling flames trapped in old, hollowed turnips. No one knew who placed them there. The villagers whispered of the keeper of the lanterns, a spirit doomed to walk until the last candle burned out. Some said it was the old father from the cottage, that after that haunted night, he vanished into the mist, leaving only his carving knife behind. Others claimed it was the grandmother, whose faith had been too strong, whose prayers bound her between worlds. And a few, in hushed voices, said it was none of them at all, that the keeper was older, much older, as ancient as the valley itself. Children were warned to stay indoors. Yet every few years, a curious soul, a shepherd, a merchant, a wandering stranger, would follow the line of lanterns into the fields. None of them ever returned before dawn. Those who dared to wait and watch from a distance said they saw the figure, tall, cloaked, carrying a single staff, its end burning faintly with blue fire. It would stop at each lantern, bend low, whisper something no one could hear, and then move on. Some swore the flames grew brighter after the whisper, as though the souls within were being gently stirred awake. On one such Halloween night, in the year 1910, a traveler came through the valley. His name was Thomas Ward, a historian chasing the folklore of forgotten villages. He had heard the tale of the 1890 Halloween, the night of whispers, of knocking doors, of unseen footsteps, and he wanted to see if the story still breathed in the present. He arrived just as the sun began to sink behind the hills. The village seemed deserted, windows shuttered, chimneys still. The air smelled of wet stone and decayed leaves. Only the faint toll of the old church bell greeted him. When darkness came, he saw them, dozens of turnip lanterns flickering along the winding road, stretching toward the valley's edge. They burned with uneven light, their carved faces smiling with the same crooked, ancient grin. His boots struck the stones softly, the air thick with damp and silence. As he walked, he thought he heard movement beside him, the faint drag of footsteps, the soft jingle of something metallic, perhaps a charm or a key. But every time he turned, there was nothing. He kept walking until the road gave way to open field. There, in the distance, a faint blue glow shimmered. And from within it, he saw the shape of a person, cloaked, tall, unmoving, standing beside the last lantern. "Good evening," Thomas called, his breath fogging in the cold. The figure turned slowly, and though its face was hidden, he could feel the weight of eyes upon him, eyes that seemed not to see him but through him, as though reading his every thought. "What is your purpose here?" the voice asked, not loud, but echoing, as if spoken from both near and far at once. "I'm a historian," Thomas said, forcing steadiness into his voice. "I came to learn the truth of this valley's legend." The figure nodded slowly. "The truth," it murmured, "is what the living forget, and what the dead remember." A chill swept through him. What happened here, on that Halloween long ago? The keeper turned its gaze toward the village. The people remembered fear, it said. But they forgot the kindness beneath it. They lit lanterns to keep spirits away, not knowing those spirits were once their own kin, waiting only for a welcome. The blue light flickered, growing fainter. "The fire must burn," the keeper whispered. "For when the last light dies, so does memory." And then, like breath fading from a mirror, the figure was gone. Thomas stood alone in the dark, surrounded by lanterns. One by one, their flames began to dim, until only a single one remained, the last turnip lantern, its small candle trembling like a heartbeat. He picked it up, holding it close to his chest. The warmth was faint, but real. The ember pulsed once, then vanished. In the silence that followed, Thomas closed the journal and pressed it against his chest. Outside, the first snow began to fall, blanketing the valley in quiet white. And along the road, one by one, faint lanterns began to glow again, their crooked grins lighting the darkness like fragile echoes of memory. Some said it was trickery, phosphor gas, or the work of unseen hands. But Thomas knew better. He left the valley before dawn, never to return. Yet each year, when Halloween came again, he would place a single candle by his window, small, flickering, and faintly scented of sage. For some promises, once made, outlive the living. And in the quiet glow of that solitary light, the spirits of 1890 were never truly gone. They say that memories fade with time. But not all of them do. Some stories sink deeper, beneath the soil and the smoke. Rooting themselves in the bones of the earth, waiting for someone to remember. Every Halloween, when the wind howls down empty streets. And the pumpkins glow on front porches across America. The same old fire stirs again. It flickers in every candle's flame. Every rustle of leaves against forgotten gravestones. Every heartbeat that quickens when we feel the dark watching. Most people think it's just tradition. The masks, the sweets, the laughter echoing in the night. But beneath it all, there is something older. Something ancient. A promise whispered from another time. When people believed that the veil between the living and the dead could be opened by firelight and faith. In 1890, that night was not a celebration. It was a prayer. A fragile hope that the dead might be remembered. That love could reach beyond the grave. And that fear, too, could be softened by the glow of a lantern. It was winter when Thomas Ward returned to the valley. Snow covered the cobblestones like a shroud, and the wind moaned softly through the empty streets. The village had changed, many cottages had crumbled, and ivy choked the old church door. Yet the people still whispered about him, the stranger who walked with ghosts. They said that since his visit on Halloween, strange things had begun to happen. Lanterns burned without being lit. The church bell tolled at hours no one touched it. And in the frost on window panes, faces sometimes appeared, watching, silent, sorrowful. Thomas had not come to chase stories this time. He had come because he could not sleep. Every night since that encounter, he heard a faint whisper as he drifted between waking and dream, "The fire must burn, the fire must burn." He could no longer tell if it came from memory or something that followed him. Inside the ruins of the old cottage, he found what he had come searching for, a box, half buried beneath fallen beams and dust. Its wood was blackened with age, the lock rusted nearly through. He pried it open carefully, his hands trembling. Inside, wrapped in linen brittle as autumn leaves, was a leather-bound book. The cover bore no name, only a faint mark, a crooked cross drawn in ash. When he opened it, a wave of stale air escaped, carrying the faint scent of lavender and peat smoke. The handwriting was delicate, feminine, written in ink that had browned with time. The first page read: The Journal of Elspeth Harrow, October, 1889. Thomas sat in the silence of the ruin, the cold creeping through his coat as he began to read. October 31st, 1890, the wind carries voices tonight. The children sleep, but I hear them still. They whisper my name as though reminding me of something I've promised but forgotten. My husband says the dead cannot cross into the world of the living, yet I feel them near. Mother says to leave honey for the departed, that kindness opens no doors to evil. Still, the knocking grows louder each year. We light the lanterns for safety, but I wonder, if they burn for us, or for them. There is one who walks among them, tall, silent, wearing gray. The children say he waits at the edge of the field until the last flame fades. I have seen him once, I think. He watched our home from the road, as though counting our candles. Perhaps he, too, is lonely. Thomas paused. The handwriting trembled as the entries went on, as if the writer's hand had begun to shake. November 1st, the knocking stopped at dawn. But before the sun rose, the door creaked open though no one had touched it. On the threshold lay a turnip lantern. Its light was gone, but inside was a lock of hair, my mother's, tied with red thread. She died 20 years ago. I will not tell the children. Let them believe the spirits are kind. Let them sleep. The page after that was blank. Then, near the end of the book, a final entry, the ink smeared, written in haste. The light must not go out. For if it does, the valley will forget. I can hear them beyond the walls, not angry, only waiting. Waiting to be remembered. I will keep the fire burning, even if I must join them. The handwriting trailed off, as though she had been interrupted mid-sentence. Thomas sat still, the old journal open in his lap, his breath clouding the air. He could almost hear her voice, the weary calm of a woman caught between faith and fear, keeping her family safe with ritual and ash. He turned toward the hearth. Only cold stone remained, but as he stared, a faint orange light flickered deep within the cracks, a dying ember that should not have survived a century. He leaned closer. The light grew stronger, swelling into a small flame that swayed as though breathing. And from somewhere, the villagers didn't carve pumpkins back then. They carved turnips. Small, pale things with trembling candlelight inside. To keep the restless souls at bay. They left plates of bread and bowls of milk on doorsteps. For those who wandered from the other side. Not out of superstition, but out of kindness. And though the world changed, though the streets filled with laughter instead of hymns, and the sacred fires became children's games, the heart of that night remains the same. We light our lanterns. We tell our stories. We remember. Perhaps that's what Thomas Ward understood in the end. That the journal, the lanterns, the whispers in the wind, they were never meant to frighten. They were meant to preserve. Because forgetting is a kind of death. And memory, even fragile, flickering memory, is the fire that never dies. So tonight, when you see the candles glowing in windows, or hear a whisper that sounds like your name carried by the wind, don't turn away. Listen. It might just be an echo of 1890. A voice from a valley that time forgot. Still keeping its promise beneath the October moon. For on Halloween night, the dead do not seek vengeance. They seek remembrance. And in every light we kindle, we give them what they have waited for all these years. A moment to be seen again. Even now, the valley still exists, though maps have changed, and names have faded. It lies somewhere beyond the old railway line, hidden between birch woods and forgotten farms. The locals rarely speak of it, except in whispers passed down from grandparents who still remember the smell of peat fires and the sound of bells that rang by themselves. They say, sometimes, if you drive those back roads on a foggy October night, you might see faint lights flickering through the trees. Not car headlights, not flashlights, but tiny, trembling lanterns moving in slow procession as though carried by invisible hands. And if you stop the car and listen carefully, you'll hear it. A low hum, soft and rhythmic, like voices singing an old tune without words. A lullaby for the forgotten. Thomas Ward's journal was never published. After his death in 1904, it passed through collectors, historians, and finally, a small museum that closed decades later. The book vanished from record. Its pages rumored to be cursed. For those who read it too long began to dream of lanterns in their windows, and ashes in their shoes by morning. But one page survived, framed behind glass in an archive in London. It bears a single line. The last words ever written in Thomas Ward's hand. The light that remembers is never alone. No one knows if he wrote it, or if someone, or something, wrote it through him. Every century or so, the old traditions stir back to life. People feel it without realizing, a restlessness in the air. A pull toward the past they can't explain. Children start lighting candles for no reason. Dogs bark at shadows. And the moon hangs lower than it should. Scholars call it coincidence. Believers call it the thinning of the veil. But in places where history sleeps lightly, like that valley, time begins to bend. Last autumn, a traveler passing through claimed to have seen a house burning in the hills. A flicker of orange and smoke twisting into the night sky. When the fire brigade arrived, there was nothing there. No ashes, no ruins. Only a circle of scorched earth. And in the center, a single turnip lantern. Its grin carved wide and hollow. its candle still burning in the wind. The traveler swore he heard a woman's voice as he turned to leave. It said, "Tell them we are still here." And so, each year, the story travels again. Through voices, through screens, through the glow of digital lanterns that light up our world in different ways. We stream horror films. We decorate porches. We chase the thrill of fear with laughter and sugar and masks. But maybe, deep down, we are still trying to do what Elspeth once did. To keep the darkness company. To make peace with it. To remember that behind every superstition was once a human heart. Frightened, faithful, and full of love. So when you carve your pumpkin tonight, think of that valley. Think of the fire that never died. And when the candle trembles in the wind, don't be afraid. It's only the past, knocking gently to be let in. Midnight comes. The streets grow quiet. Children sleep, their candy half-eaten. Their costumes scattered on the floor. And somewhere, between one breath and the next, a faint shimmer passes through the world. The shadows grow softer. The air turns colder. On some forgotten windowsill, an old lantern flickers to life. Its flame steady and patient, as if waiting for a story to begin again. Because as long as we tell it, as long as we remember, the fire of 1890 will never die. And maybe, just maybe, that's all the spirits ever wanted. In every generation, there comes one night when the past leans closer. When the air feels heavier. When the silence carries voices that sound almost familiar. It was on such a night, more than 100 years after Elspeth's lanterns faded, that the valley awoke once more. The calendar said October 31st. Halloween. But in that small corner of forgotten earth, the hour was older. The moon hung low, a swollen silver eye behind a veil of clouds. Mist coiled around the trees like smoke from 1,000 unseen fires. And on the road that cut through the valley, a car rolled slowly forward, its headlights slicing through the fog. Inside sat a young woman named Clara Ward. A historian. Thomas Ward's great-granddaughter. She had spent years tracing his journals, his maps, his scattered letters. And now, at last, she had found the valley that haunted his words. Her GPS had stopped working miles ago. The road behind her had vanished into mist. Only the faint glow ahead guided her, a flickering light that danced somewhere between the trees. She parked on the roadside, heart pounding softly in her chest, and stepped into the cold. The light was moving, swaying, just out of reach. A lantern. Old, metal, its glass cracked, but burning bright as though it had never been extinguished. Clara followed. Each step took her deeper into silence. Until she reached what remained of the old village. Stone walls. Collapsed roofs. A church bell twisted by rust. The lantern flickered ahead of her, floating toward the hearth. There, among the stones, something glimmered. A small, round object, covered in dust and cobwebs. Clara knelt and brushed it clean. It was a turnip, shriveled, hollow, carved with a smile. Inside, against all reason, a candle burned. She felt warmth on her skin. The same warmth Thomas had described in his notes. The same light that had whispered to him through the ruins. And then, she heard it. A woman's voice, faint and calm, speaking through the crackle of the flame. The light must not go out. Clara froze. The sound was gentle, but it filled the air, echoing through the stones and trees and the very ground beneath her feet. Her throat tightened. She looked around, but there was no one there. Only the lantern, the wind, and the whispering flame. Then, as if the air itself had taken a breath, every window in the ruins came alive. Dozens of lanterns flaring to life one by one, casting golden halos through the fog. The village was glowing again, just as it had in 1890. Through the mist, faint shapes began to appear. Figures in old clothes, carrying candles and baskets. Children laughing softly. Women with shawls drawn tight. Men tipping hats to unseen neighbors. They were not ghosts in the way we imagine. They were memories made visible. The living shadows of a night that had never ended. Clara stood in their midst, trembling, but unafraid. Elspeth Harrow stepped from the doorway, her face kind, her eyes bright with the same firelight that flickered in every lantern. "You've come far," she said. "But the road between us is shorter than you think." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Why me?" she whispered. Elspeth smiled. "Because you still believe." She held out her hand, and Clara saw that in her palm was a single ember, small, red, alive. "Take it," Elspeth said. "The world forgets too easily. You must help it remember." Clara reached out. And as her fingers touched the ember, the world filled with light. When morning came, the valley was quiet again. No ruins. No lanterns. No sign of the night before. But when Clara opened her eyes, she found herself standing by her car, the sky pale with dawn. In her hand was the old turnip lantern, still warm. And inside it, a small, steady flame. She took it home. And that Halloween, for the first time in her city, she placed it by her window. Neighbors asked where she'd found such an odd relic. She just smiled and said, "It's an old family tradition." That night, her candle burned long after the others had gone out. And when the clock struck midnight, a faint whisper drifted through the quiet street. Years passed. The world changed, cities rose, machines hummed, and the dark corners of the earth grew smaller. But in quiet homes and candlelit windows, something ancient began to stir again. No one spoke of the valley. It disappeared from maps and memory, swallowed by progress. Yet somehow, the tradition returned. In whispers, in gestures, in the soft flicker of flame. Children began to carve faces into pumpkins again. Not knowing why they smiled as they placed candles inside. Neighbors lit lanterns at their doors. Not realizing they were reenacting a promise made long before they were born. And each year, as the leaves fell and the nights lengthened, the same feeling returned. A hush, a stillness, a stirring beneath the noise of celebration. It wasn't fear. It was remembrance. The living honoring the lost. The past brushing against the present. Like the warmth of a hand that never truly left. In the city where Clara lived, people began to notice her window light. Every year, on the last night of October, it glowed brighter than the rest. Children would stop and stare at it, drawn to its calm, steady flame. Some said it looked old-fashioned. Others swore they saw a shadow move behind it. A woman in a shawl, smiling softly. Watching the world with eyes that knew. They didn't know her name. They didn't need to. The fire remembered for them. Clara grew old. When she passed away, her neighbors found the turnip lantern still on her table. It had no wick, no oil, and yet the inside glowed faintly, like a heartbeat. Her house became part of local legend. Every Halloween night, people said the light still appeared in her window, flickering once, then fading as dawn broke. Some came to mock it. Some came to see proof of ghosts. But those who stayed long enough felt something else. A quiet warmth. A peace that had no words. And maybe that was the truth all along. That Halloween was never about fear or death. Somewhere far away, in the ruins of that old valley, a single lantern still burns. Its flame never wavers, never fades, never dies. It is the same fire that burned in Elspeth's hearth, the same glow that touched Thomas's trembling hands, the same spark that Clara carried home through the fog. A chain of light, linking centuries of hearts that refuse to forget. And if you stand there on a cold October night, you might still hear it. A woman's voice carried on the wind. Soft as a sigh, ancient as time. The light must not go out. And if you listen closely, you'll realize something. It never did. Because every candle, every pumpkin, every story told beneath a pale October moon, is part of that same fire. And long after we are gone, it will still burn, waiting for the next soul to remember the night when the living and the dead stood side by side in the glow of the lanterns, and called it Halloween.